My name is Imad Harb, and I am the Director of Research at Arab Center, Washington, D.C. Today, we're going to be talking about Iraq, and with us today, we have Dr. Abbas Kadhim, who is the Director of the Iraq Initiative and a Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council. And we're going to be discussing with him Iraqi issues and the complicated situation in that country. Dr. Abbas, hello, how are you?
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad. Good to see you.
Iraq is going through some really tough times, economically, politically, socially, and in foreign policy, obviously. President Barham Saleh just chose former Najaf governor Adnan al-Zurfi to form the new government after Mr. Muhammad Alawi failed to form that government. What do you think? This is probably a big question, but what do you think are the chances for Mr. Zurfi to actually succeed where Mr. Alawi failed?
Well, Iraqi politics is always contentious. Mr. al-Zurfi has been in the political process for a long time, since 2004. And he has created many friends and many enemies. So definitely that will be at play. I believe that it is going to be a hard fight for him to get a confirmation in the parliament. So far, he has a decent level of support, but his opponents are not giving up, and they are trying to work as much as they can to force a replacement before it gets to a parliamentary vote. This is one of the downsides of the muhasasa, the political apportionment among Iraqi political parties. The prime ministership normally is left for the Iraqi Shia blocs. And the going theory is that for that position to be filled, the nominee and the candidate must have a consensus among the major Shia blocs. So far, whether it is Mohammed Tawfiq Alawi or Adnan al-Zurfi, neither of them has that consensus. It might not have anything to do with them, but it is with the nature of the political rivalries, and also what every side's view of what is best for Iraq, being pro-America, being pro-Iran, also on domestic issues as well.
Yeah. Do you think this is just a subtext here? Do you think that his what is seen are his good relations with the United States would be helpful or not so helpful?
Well, it is not helpful to have strong relations with one side or another. Too much closeness to the United States needs to have a similar ability to work with the Iranians. This is the sad fact of Iraqi politics these days and for the past years. And I think any prime minister who is in one camp, whether it is in the Iranian camp or in the American camp, without having toleration from the other side, it is not going to be helpful for the prime minister to govern well and to create consensus inside Iraq, because both countries have tentacles and strong levels of impact and influence inside Iraq, and either side can thwart the prime minister's effort, as we have seen in the past.
Right. Are there any specific lessons, do you think, that he can learn from Muhammad Alawi's experience?
Well, there are many. One of the reasons why Muhammad Tawfiq Alawi failed is that he kept his cabinet formation a secret. He did not let anyone in, and he didn't do enough consultation with various powers. He attacked the parliament, and these are the people who are supposed to go and vote for him, and called them corrupt and accused some of them of taking bribes.
Not very politic.
Yes, not political at all. And he also have been seen as a person who did not communicate with the population at large. He also chose some of the people in the cabinet, at least the names that came out in the media were completely unqualified, which really defeated his promises of having a professional and also in a cabinet with integrity. Many of his people have had checkered past, to say it mildly or nicely.
Right, yeah.
So Adnan could probably benefit from those lessons and change the style.
I know this is going to be a bit tough to answer, but I'm going to be putting you on a little bit of a limb here. But what are his chances, really? I mean, how long can he go without going for that government, without forming it?
It's a very good question, but if I were to probably maneuver the answer a little bit, it is not about the chances. He can easily secure a confirmation, but the question is what happens after the confirmation. We know that he can get the numbers if he bribes enough blocks to get to vote for him, and clear the Kurds are not interested much in the governance and in the ideals of democracy. They want what they want, which is somebody who will let them do their own thing and not bother them as it happened in the past.
Right.
If he gives them that, definitely they will vote for him happily. The Sunnis, same thing. Basically, they are very happy to keep the ministries that they will be given as fiefdoms and use them for their own personal enrichment, and they will do that. Shia groups, if he bribes enough Shia blocks to complete the picture and get a multi-partisan things, he can get that. But the problem with it is how many positions and how much power should he relinquish to these groups and still keep some kind of a semblance of legitimacy and also be able to govern. Because if he gives these people all what they want, he will be completely defanged. And the task for the next prime minister cannot be complete and fulfilled unless he is strong and he wields all kinds of power and consensus in his hands. So he can make his confirmation a reality, but it can be at the expense of his success, and he might face the fate of Prime Minister Adil Abdel Mahdi if he doesn't play it carefully.
Right. Well, Iraq is going through some really tough economic times, and right now with the drop in the collapse of oil prices, Iraq is one of those countries that's going to be really suffering from the Iraqi economy is going to really get a big hit. What can the Iraqi government, whether it is the sitting one, the caretaker one right now, or if a future Iraqi government, what can they do to really stem the tide, so to speak, of this collapse in the economy?
Well, right now there is not much that can be done because there is a preponderance of or an accumulation of many problems that are happening all at once. First, you have the chronic problems of Iraq, which is that we know, problems with the depleted infrastructure, a lot of corruption, bad governance, the destruction that happened from the many years of, in fact, decades of wars and conflict. These are there, and on top of them, you have what you just said, the problem of oil prices. If oil prices continue on this trajectory for the balance of the year, probably it will not be useful economically for Iraq to sell the oil because the cost or the overhead cost for exporting oil will be more than what Iraq will collect. It will come to few dollars on the barrel that Iraq will get. And 95% of Iraqi budget comes from oil. So that's a disaster that is in the making for Iraq. Also, then there is this problem of corona virus.
Right. I was going to get to that. Yeah.
And Iraq. I mean, the minister of, and we probably talk about the minister of health. He was complaining that he could not get $5 million from the government to make some preparations for meeting the pandemic. If this spreads in a way like Iran or Italy, God forbid, then Iraq will be exhausted completely, and none of what we talk about matters.
Right. Yeah. This is this is something that they have to really address right away, because
Yes.
it can really wreak havoc on the country. What are the how are the different militias today? We witnessed last week there was an attack on the Taji military base, and we witnessed the retaliation from the United States against certain Kataib Hezbollah and other militant groups. Where are we here? I mean, are we going to just continue like this, or will there be some sort of a breaking point where either the United States or these militias just simply decide that this is just adding to the instability of the country, and this is not really very conducive to how Iraq can really rebuild itself?
Well, this is a huge question. The militias and all of the fighting groups, first, they are not monolith. They have various persuasions, mixed loyalties, and many identities within the large group. Also, the problem of the militias is a failure of the government to implement the 2016 law of the popular mobilization units. Both Prime Ministers Abadi and Abdel Mahdi did not do much to implement that. And on the one hand, those fighting groups were a major cause or a major element in defeating ISIS. On the other hand, under the umbrella of the popular mobilization units, you have a lot of malign activities that are happening not by everybody, but by certain groups that are well known. So we are having a hot potato here. On the one hand, they are needed as long as there is a threat of terrorism. I don't believe that the Iraqi security forces can hold their own ground without the help from these fighting groups. Also, they are armed and they are strong, and nobody in Iraq is interested in going against them. That's one side. The other side is that those who complain about the fighting groups and the militias, mostly, we are concerned here with Washington and in the United States. Let's remember that, the original sin of the whole problem here lies with the United States. They failed between 2003 and 2011 to see or work effectively to form credible Iraqi security forces that led to the meltdown of the army and other forces that the U.S. built in June of 2014. And that was what really caused the militias to regroup and be there in the first place. So it's rich for some people who failed to do what they were supposed to do to keep Iraq as a strong ally, to come back and complain of the result of their failures. That's one side, but that doesn't mean we should allow these groups to continue unfettered. There needs to be hard work, hard decisions, bold decisions to be made by the Iraqi government, and they should get also all of the help they can to do it. That's one side. The other side here is that the issue of the militias right now is that it is not just an Iraqi decision. The militias received support from Iran, and they receive also support from internal forces inside Iraq, and that is a fact. Many of them do receive that kind of support. Right now, there is a new kind of formation. They are moving into an insurgency mode, regrouping, renaming and rebranding some of their names, like this new Osbat al-Tha'ireen, which just started recently. It seems like a way to camouflage some groups within the popular mobilization unit. So, because the existing ones are well known, their headquarters are known, and they are easy to bomb and to target. So by making a new brand, it will kind of cover who gets involved, and then give an unknown name to known actors. And will this kind of work or this kind of attempt provide the results they intend them to provide? We don't know. But definitely we see that there are many attempts to adapt with the realities that the United States now is hitting hard against certain groups whenever an activity happens that the US doesn't like. Time will tell, and I think this is going to be one of the huge tasks before the next prime minister, the one that might make or break his premiership.
This is what I was going to follow up with was a new prime minister, if he establishes his government, where are the armed forces? I mean, will he be assured of the support, the full support of the armed forces, considering his really very precarious kind of political situation?
The Iraqi armed forces do not have a unified entity as they used to before 2003.
Right.
In that day, the Iraqi army was an institution that has a life of its own. In many cases, it was a state within the state. Right. Now, it is nothing more than just many or a mixed group, so with mixed loyalties. Each one of them reports to their own ethno-sectarian boss, if you will. The Iraqi army today is almost like the Lebanese army during the Civil War time.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Whenever you take them to fight against one group, those who belong to that group will drop their uniforms and say, we don't want to do that. That is one of the challenges that or forced the Iraqi government to use other fighting forces with better doctrine and more unified loyalties.
Right.
The task ahead is really to consolidate the Iraqi security forces into an entity, take politics out of the security forces works, and then make sure that they report completely to a good chain of command, well-defined structure and hierarchy. Now it is really hard. The Ministry of Defense is nothing more than just a contracting agency and personnel agency. It doesn't do anything, and it's not involved in the day-to-day operations of the military. There is a lot of confusion on who reports to whom. I think there needs to be a separate task force, maybe under the supervision of the next prime minister, to fix all of these glitches and problems with the Iraqi security forces. Otherwise, Iraq will always be vulnerable to threats and will be forced to use auxiliaries such as the popular mobilization units and others.
Right. Finally, one last question. Iran. I mean, it's tough to say that when in Iran's foreign policy today that the unfortunate coronavirus infections in Iran, and it's really a very, very major pandemic inside Iran. Is the Iranian leadership too busy to really pay attention to Iraq? Is there an opportunity for Iraqi political forces to work a little bit outside of the influence of Iran?
Well, Iran is a big question whenever we talk about Iraq and Iraqi politics. Iran is probably the country that holds most influence and impact because Iran puts a huge importance on Iraq and its relations with Iraq, rightfully so. The Iranians, no matter what challenges they have proven in the past 40 years to be very adaptive, very savvy. And I believe that those who are in charge of the Iraqi dossier are not deterred or distracted by what goes on domestically with the coronavirus and the economic problems. So, but on the other hand, they suffered a huge setback with the killing of General Soleimani, who was the institutional memory for Iran's involvement in Iraq. I believe, as I wrote recently, that this current government formation will be probably the best test that will reveal to us how much power Iran has left or how much power has lost in Iraq. But Iran, I would not discount it when it comes to Iraqi politics, domestic and international politics of Iraq, anytime soon. They will always be there because they cannot afford losing Iraq.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Abbas Kadhim. We really appreciate your input and your expertise on this very, very tough situation that Iraq is going through. And we appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.